Hello, everyone. On today's show, Mike and I talk about what general contractors who build high end homes need to know about contracts, insurance requirements, and risk management, including key policy provisions that could determine whether your business survives a catastrophic loss. Hit subscribe and follow along. We hope you learned something new and enjoy the show. Welcome to Falcon Forward. My name's Peter. I'm here with Mike Tanghe, our president, and it's Friday, and we usually record on Mondays, so I'm all turned around. In fact, all week I thought it was like the next day ahead, and I thought I was just falling even further behind on things I had to get done. So I will have this edited and out on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts probably about, I don't know, 30, 45 minutes after we're done recording. So, anyways, Mike, happy Friday. How's your day going?
It's a great day. I was enjoying end of the week of trying to get stuff wrapped up that you've been working on all throughout the week, and having some measurable progress before all things end.
Yeah, and I'm dressed a little more casually today, and I'm with my black backdrop. I was just finishing up. I just had to just change hats real quick, so a little more casual than I like to be on this one. But, anyways, hopefully you're listening to us and not looking at us. How's that?
That's
All
a
right, so
wonderful choice.
today,
Yeah, done.
yeah, exactly. So today, we want to talk about basically like high net worth like companies that build nice houses. Like I don't know how else to kind of segue into this. It's really but Mike and I had met with we went and met with someone for coffee, and then afterwards we were talking through some things, and I was like, man, that'd be a great podcast episode. So we still went through it in person, and then I was like, I can't take notes fast enough. I'd rather have this recorded. So here we are. So Mike, I'm gonna pass it over to you, and I'm gonna let you kind of run point on today's topic.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Peter. As always, enjoy when we get the ability to talk through kind of in-depth topics for our current employees, and then for people who are thinking about joining us in the future. And the idea here is today specifically we're going to talk about general contractors who build nice homes, and what they should be doing from a contract and risk management standpoint to make sure that they will always be able to build nice homes and don't experience something that, although infrequent, although not likely, these things happen, things that we see firsthand and have seen, unfortunately, and how things are set up for the contractor for it will really make a difference between is that company going to be around or not be around. So this particular show, we're going to focus on general contractors. And specifically, we're going to talk about provisions that they should be taking to ensure that their business survives a catastrophic event that could occur. So the very first thing that we always tell people is you got to have a contract. Short summary of that is if you don't have a contract, then it doesn't exist. It's not written down on paper. And when we say contract, what do we mean by that? We mean something between you and the homeowner that spells out what happens. Really, for the focus of this podcast, is between you and your subcontractors. So very few builders do everything in-house, 100% in-house. There's going to be certain things that they sub out, whether it's a specialty like electrical or plumbing, or just some contractors exist only on paper. I mean, paper general contractor not having any employees, but all contractors, all GCs to some extent will sub things out. And these are very important provisions that you want to have. So first step is get yourself a contract, hire an attorney that is experienced with a real estate law, construction law, employment law, and then make sure that you have a rock solid contract on that. The next step. So now you got a contract. What should be in that contract? And here we're specifically talking about the insurance requirements. So we'll give the standard disclaimer. We are not attorneys. So again, you need to hire an attorney to draw this up for you. Don't just go on the internet and copy and paste something on there, but spend the money to make sure that your contract is unique to you, unique to your local provisions, laws, regulations, and make sure that you get that attorney works closely with an insurance broker to make sure that certain elements are incorporated properly and legally in the contract.
Mhm.
So when we say insurance requirements, what are we talking about? We're talking about provisions related to general liability and workers' comp, which again, we commonly see those things in contracts. But we'd also want to make sure those same provisions apply for auto, and not just the auto coverage, automobile coverage, vehicle coverage, but then excess coverage. And then things like if this person's involved in any sort of design work, errors and emissions coverage. We see more and more the importance of cyber insurance So just the transmission of data. So, most people think contractors, they're people who are building stuff. Absolutely true. But there's still an exchange of data. And maybe it's in how you pay that particular contractor. Maybe it's in how that contractor accesses the plans, the design. But the amount of data that's transmitted is significant when you're working, especially on some of these higher end homes. And you want to make sure that that party carries cyber insurance. And if they introduce a virus, or if bad actors use their login credentials that you've given them to take down your website, or just impact your data, corrupt your data in some form or fashion, you want to make sure that contractor has insurance coverage for that. And then pollution coverage can also be important depending on what that particular sub is going to be doing for you. In that contract that you have, you're also going to want to specify what limits are required. And if you're building higher end homes, and we see homes that are, 20, 30, $40 million in replacement costs in certain parts of the country, it's important that, these people don't just have $1 million per occurrence limits that, really won't cover a thing. Next up then is, okay, you got your contract, you got your insurance requirements. What are the provisions that are specified in that contract? So additional insured protection is kind of the basic or bare minimum. But then specifics on completed operations wording in that contract. If they don't have that, then this coverage they have may only protect you when that contractor is working on the project. If they're all done and something happens later and there isn't any completed operations wording, guess what? You don't have any fallback with an insurance company. You want to see provisions like waivers of subrogation, and not just on the general liability, but also on the auto coverage and also on the workers' comp coverage. I will go into that a little bit more in our claim
Okay.
example
I
of.
was going to ask what you're throwing. It feels like a legal term, right? So I just want to get into that later then.
Yeah, we'll talk further on what a waiver of subrogation is in a little bit. You also want to make sure that you have things like primary and non-contributory wording. I will go into a little detail on that, and then a per project aggregate. So all these are important provisions that it's not just enough to say, hey, this guys gave me a piece of paper that says they have insurance, all's good. No, that's not all good. You have to make sure that in your contract, you're specifying these are the things that you need. And then the next step, of course, is, okay, are they complying with this contract? Is what
Mhm.
this contractor is carrying meet what we're requiring them to carry in the contract? So, and how do you do that? You do that through a certificate of insurance as a starter, but then you also want to get those full policy pages so you can see, are there exclusions in their policy that would negate some of these things that are specified on a certificate? And we've seen that numerous times. And it could be exclusions for what the excess is going to cover. It could be exclusions on the type of operations that they're doing, whether it's related to the height or the depth or just the type of work that they're doing. We had a client who had hired their handyman, had gotten proof of coverage from this person, and had this person doing stuff that was out of the scope of what their insurance covered, specifically hot work. And the guy's working on the roof, started a fire, and burnt the building down. And this is actually for a prospect of ours, so someone we came across, and later they became a client. But when this contractor filed the claim, found out his insurance was for a handyman, and it excluded the type of work that he was doing.
Yeah.
So if you're not looking at the policies and not understanding what's in it and covered, then you could often find yourself at the wrong time to not have the right type of coverage. On these certificates, it's very important that you're named as in your specific entity is named on that certificate, and then you're notified. So what happens if the client gives you a certificate, and if you're not named on it or listed on that, and the client stops paying their insurance premiums, or the policy gets canceled for some other reason, you're not going to get notified if you're not specifically listed as a certificate holder. And then the other thing with certificates is to keep good files. So, sometimes these claims, something bad may not happen until years after work is done, and a company could be out of business. And if you have that, your files have your certificate, and you know who was the insurance company that represented that company that's no longer around, and then you'd still have the ability to make a claim with them. So, and then also the same lines of a contractor going out of business, you want to make sure that your sub is using an insurance company that is of a high enough rating and well established, so that that insurance company doesn't go out of business and leave you with, again, all the compliance in the world, but nothing to back it up with. Questions that.
Yeah, so I do, and I'm not distracted. I'm actually writing things down as we're going, but I would imagine. So we're talking about these high value homes, houses that cost 20 to $30 million to rebuild or just build to begin with, right? I mean, we're starting from ground zero. When I've in the past like talk to contractors, right? I mean, we're like usually if it's a commercial project, that feels like a different conversation. I've never built a home from scratch. But what is that dynamic? Like we have clients that build nice homes and their clients are asking them for this. You know, what is the how does the contractor feel about getting that question, right? Because, obviously, okay, we have this contract in place. We've been working on this, blueprints for a long time. I'm imagining this conversation should happen before you even start talking about the design. Like, I kind of want to talk about the time frame, but what is the contractor's response? Like, should they be giving these policies over relatively easily? I mean, how does that work? Because there is a human element to that, and some people are uncomfortable asking and they need to, right? I think that's very valid to call out because I have seen that. It's like, it's kind of inconvenient. I've already kind of got the ball rolling. I don't really want to, upset anybody. And it's like, well, things could go really, if something happens. So maybe walk us through that like human relationship a little bit.
Sure. And if I understand what you're asking is almost like from a homeowner's perspective, asking a contractor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The client's perspective, right?
Yep. So a little bit different angle than because what I'm talking about here are things if we were representing the general contractor, not the homeowner
Right.
in this situation.
Okay.
But to answer it, and this is a question that if we have a general contractor as a client, that they will get these requests from their clients, from the homeowners that they're building for.
Mhm.
Uh, and I mean, again, this isn't it's a contract, right?
Yeah.
And so whatever is agreed upon in the contract, and that's why the very first thing I said was your first step is your contract, because that's going to
Right.
spell out what you need to do. These are all things that an insurance company will provide to whomever's requesting. So if it's a homeowner requesting it, insurance companies will provide it. If it's a general asking it of its subs, the subcontractors insurance company, they will offer all these things. All right, I'm sorry. They will provide all these things. They will not offer them.
Right.
And the difference with that is an insurance company doesn't want to necessarily do these things because it's putting them on the hook for actions of whomever is supplying these documents. With that said, these are extremely common requests to have that when you ask for them, they will provide it. If you
Okay.
don't ask for it, you're not getting it. But a lot of times there isn't an additional cost or anything. Sometimes there is for some of these provisions, depending on the carrier that you're with. But for the most part, there is no additional cost, and there is, but you got to ask for it. So
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. That's kind of what I was thinking about. So just as I'm on the consumer side, right? Kind of thinking, okay, on the outside, people listening to this might be, well, I'm paying a contractor to do it, right? How should that look too? And maybe we could
yeah,
talk about that. But anyways, I wanted to address that first.
yeah, and we've actually have a podcast where we've talked a little bit further about
Yeah.
from a homeowner's perspective what things they should be asking for. It's similar, just with a little bit different angle on what you're asking. What I'm running through here would be specifically related to a general contractor, what they should be getting from their subs
Right.
to make sure that they're still around in the event of a catastrophic event.
I will link to that podcast. I was there for it, I promise. But at the same time, I was like, man, like this is something I got to think about a little bit more and kind of round it out. So, all right, we can move on to the next bullet point we got here.
Yep, perfect. So just elaborating a little bit, we threw out some terms there, waiver, subrogation, primary non-contributory wording, per project aggregate. What do all those things mean? So waiver of subrogation means that you're agreeing that if something happens, you will waive your right or anyone who you are representing, in this case, an insurance company. So you're going to basically tell the insurance company that they cannot try and collect or subrogate against an at fault party. And you think, whoa, why would an insurance company ever agree to that? It's a way to essentially prevent infighting on a claim so that if something happens, and again, if you think about who has control in this, the general contractor gets to specify to a sub, hey, if you want to work for me, these are things I need to protect myself. And so you're telling that sub, I need you to put a waiver of subrogation in there that says, hey, you have insurance. If you screw up, I want your insurance to pay. And I don't want your insurance necessarily trying to come back against me and say, oh, we think you're 5% at fault, 10% at fault. A waiver of subrogation basically says each The party that caused the incident pays and is prevented from coming back and trying to bring down everyone else on that claim. So it's extremely important to have those waivers of subrogation. And you want to see that on your general liability policy, the workers' comp. And then this gets commonly missed, but also on an auto policy. When you think of a job site, you got people with pickup trucks unloading, loading stuff. So you could have someone injured. And if you got injured by, let's say you're moving a piece of equipment or you're moving some materials and it falls and hurts someone, then that's a general liability claim. If it's anything related to a vehicle, it's an auto claim, even if it's, same type of injury that happened. So if you don't have these same provisions applying on your auto coverage as you do on your general liability, where we commonly see them, it could be a significant gap for you. So
Sure.
that's a waiver of subrogation.
Yeah.
A completed ops wording, complete operations wording. This is fairly self-explanatory, but it basically says that whatever coverage you have will apply once you've finished that project. So reason why you want to have your subs do that is if they don't have that wording on their policy, there's some insurance policies out there that say, hey, we'll provide all this coverage, but only when we're on the job site. Once we're off the job site, once our work here is done, then basically whatever you got from us before is gone. So it's a way for insurance companies to try and limit their exposure and provide less really substandard coverage. And if you're not asking for it in a contract, then in theory, they could put something like that in.
Gotcha.
Primary non-contributory wording just means that, hey, you have insurance, I have insurance, so we both have insurance. If you have a claim or if you cause a claim or if, we both cause a claim, but we think you caused it first, we want your insurance to be the first line of defense that applies, and then my insurance will become secondary to that. And that's important, again, in a very messy claim where we may both have some negligence, the general contractor and the sub. You're saying, again, because you're the one in the control and dictating the terms, you're saying, hey, sub, in order for you to work for me, I need to have this on it. If you don't have that wording in there, then potentially the general's insurance could get put into place first or alongside of that sub in a very messy claim. Versus if you have the wording in there, first we're going to exhaust all the subs limits before we even get to my limits. And then a per project aggregate just means that, hey, we want the insurance that we're specifying from you to apply solely to our job. Again, subs will work on multiple jobs, multiple projects. If they have claims during the course of a year on another job, I don't want it to impact what they have remaining on their insurance for me. So we're going to ask for something called a per project aggregate. And if you don't have that, your sub could specify, hey, you got to provide these limits of insurance to me. And they do. But what happens if the next week they have a big claim?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden those limits are now being eroded for something that happened on a different job project. I don't want that. So if I haven't specified, though, that you got to have a per project aggregate or per job aggregate, then you can be out of luck.
And I would imagine the subcontractor has another loss on another job site. They're not going to come to you and be like, hey, I just got to let you know, I just had a, $500,000 loss over here. Just letting you know, right? Because they're not going to have that conversation.
100%. And even if they were to do something like that, you're not going to know because it's not like something, these are all claims that are going to take years to unfortunately work their way through. And so you won't know until years go by. Are they going to have any insurance? If I have a claim at some point in the future against these guys, you won't know. And so again, how do you protect yourself in the best way? It's make sure you have that per project aggregate, which will give you limits for your job. And again, insurance companies will offer all this stuff. I'm sorry. They'll provide it. They won't offer it.
Right. So one thing that I've spent like a lot of time on, and we actually go through this in the academy. The reason I added it into the Falcon West Academy is that indemnity it's a legal word. It's also an insurance word, very much so, right? And we review MSAs. So we're reviewing contracts that clients might have. And in oil and gas, predominantly we see what's called knock for knock, right? So, you're responsible for your stuff, we're responsible for ours, we'll figure it out. And then there's other ones, control-based and fault-based indemnity that we go into. In California, because I haven't, worked with many contractors in California, most, again, energy contracts is kind of what I spent time spending, looking at. But like, what is the language in these contracts typically? Is it like a percentage where it's like, hey, you're 10% at fault, we're 90% at fault? How is that discussion usually coming? And are insurance carriers concerned with the language in those contracts, and are they wanting to see what those are as well?
Yeah, great question. That'd be awesome if we had an attorney
Yeah.
as a guest on it, because honestly, I'm not sure
Okay.
of that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if how that applies.
That would be a fun conversation though. If we could find an attorney that was in that, it'd be actually really cool to talk to him about that. I'm just
Yeah, no,
curious how that would work.
yeah, lots of
Because
attorneys that we know and we've worked closely with on that.
yeah.
So fun potential guest to have for sure.
Yeah. And again, we're not reviewing these MSAs from a legal basis, but our job is to get the MSA, look at it, determine like the type of indemnity generally, and then send it to an underwriter and say, hey, we think it's, knock for knock and that should, but hey, can you, they verify and they have their people that do it. But we look at those all the time. And again, a lot of it is again for the insurance requirements, right? We need to have, certain limits for GL, auto, workers' comp, and then you have again, waiver subrogation, additional insureds, all those other fun things that we kind of covered there too. So,
Yeah, 100%.
uh,
So
yeah,
yeah, what does all this stuff mean in real life scenarios? So what I thought would be interesting is I will give two different scenarios of real things that happen, change some of the details to protect just our client and prospect and subs info on it. But these are all things that I had firsthand knowledge of in very bad catastrophic situations that could have gone a bad way, and ultimately for our clients, because of the steps they had in place, it turned out as best as it possibly could have for them.
perfect. I was going to ask you, I'm like, we need some real life examples here or, as close to it as we can. So we'll
Yeah,
anonymize this, but yeah, let's be great to walk through that.
yeah, exactly. So the first of these was had a client building a really nice house, getting close to the end when they were testing the fire sprinkler system. So his home was maybe 80% done. And then, fortunately, on a Friday afternoon, they tested the system, and then left it on. And again, this was a subcontractor that was working for our client, who's the general on the job. And then Monday morning, when they came back to start working, realized that sometime over the weekend, the fire sprinkler system that was still on had failed. And, this, now nearly complete, really, really, really nice house had a bit of water in the inside of it. So bad situation for sure. But what happened here? So if you look at our in this particular situation, our client had a waiver of subrogation in a builder's risk policy on it. And they also had indemnity provisions with the subcontractor, the sprinkler contractor who had come in and done the work, additional insured protection from that sprinkler subcontractor. So where did they go from there? So they had a builder's risk policy. So a claim was filed with the builder's risk policy. It was a multi-million-dollar claim, and the builder's risk company, said, "Yep, damage to this house." Builder's risk is a property policy, so it paid to fix get the property back to its pre-loss condition on it. And importantly, this policy had a waiver of subrogation provision. There's a waiver of subrogation provision in the contract with the homeowner that said, hey, homeowner, you buy builder's risk coverage, you must have this waiver of subrogation in it. And the idea of why you would want that in there is, if you think about it from a homeowner's perspective, the loss happened. Like, you're not getting around that. The homeowner wants things to get fixed as quickly as possible in that scenario. And so if there is the ability to subrogate a loss, now all of a sudden it's not going to get fixed as quickly as possible.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
there'll be proceeds to fix things, but if there's litigation against the builder saying, hey, this was your fault, we're going to sue you for it. And if it's that insurance company that paid that loss, it just creates a very uncomfortable real world situation of, you now want me to fix this house and finish this house, but I'm being sued by your insurance company on it. So from a homeowner's perspective, they don't want that either. They just want their house fixed as quickly as
Right.
possible.
They want to move in.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the system worked. A builder's risk policy paid the loss. Waiver of subrogation prevented that and protected our client, who again was the general contractor, in that of them having to worry, oh my gosh, are we facing a multi-million-dollar lawsuit on this claim?
Okay.
Thankfully they weren't. So again, good wording in a contract saved our builder from just years of potential lawsuit and expensive litigation, not to mention almost torpedoing, or not almost, it would have likely torpedoed the
Oh yeah.
client relationship as well.
Absolutely.
So that one worked good. Second claim scenario we'll talk about here. And again, we're only going to talk about the specific as it relates to a contract. In this one, unfortunately, someone was severely injured. The person was paralyzed, which, again, it was a terrible, terrible accident. We're going to not address the loss for that person and their family occurred, because it's certainly we don't want to appear like we're ignoring that or
Yeah.
recognizing that it was not a good situation. But
Hmm.
unfortunately, accidents happen, and this is a good example of, okay, if you have things set up correctly, will an accident like this put you out of business and disrupt the lives of all your other employees and everything you work for, or does it allow you to move on from, again, a terrible accident? So in this particular situation, we had a sub that was working for our builder, the general contractor, who was trenching a new sewer system in there. um, and company putting in the sewer system, the utilities had hired a trenching company who did things incorrectly. They didn't trench things out correctly. When they were doing the install, trench collapse, a worker was injured and ultimately ended up paralyzed on this, and just, again, a very bad situation on a job site. So again, not diminishing anything,
Yeah, no, it's terrible.
but if you just look at it from what happened next. So that worker, his employer had workers' compensation coverage. So great. That's who's going to immediately pay all medical bills, future loss of future earnings, and effectively give this person to make them as whole as it possibly could, was the workers' comp insurer. Okay. So there's no litigation with that. There's nothing. It's a first dollar response, meaning that you don't have to sue or fight or anything like that. The bills come in, the workers' comp insurer pays them. Great. So workers' comp insurer says, okay, we've paid all this, we've fulfilled our obligation, but we would like to recoup what we've paid out, the millions of dollars we paid out from who we think was at fault in this scenario. So what happens? What's the first thing we always talk about here is you got to have a contract in place.
Right.
So everyone starts looking at the contracts that was in place. In the contract that RGC required from his subs, there was a waiver of subrogation, as well as a requirement for this person to carry workers' compensation coverage on it. So that prevented the workers' comp insurer from being able to go back against our builder or go back against the other subs that worked on that job site for what they paid out for the work comp loss. So,
Hmm.
all right, kind of able to move on from that. The employee who is injured, and again, a very sympathetic party, so the workers' comp insurer couldn't sue, but this employee could file a lawsuit and did file a lawsuit against everyone, alleging negligence on all parties. So sued the homeowner, sued our client, the general contractor, sued the sub who did the original trenching work, sued his employer so he sued all these parties. And again, very sympathetic person. And we understand why the law firm that was representing him did this, is that whole deep pockets. We're going to sue everybody. All right. Okay. So again, when we go to the contracts, what did the contract say? Our client had that primary and non-contributory wording along with the indemnity provision on it. So when our client was named in a lawsuit, we notified their carrier of this, but we also looked at the contracts and then notified the subs that were working on this and said, okay, you've agreed to indemnify us if we're brought in a lawsuit on your behalf. And you've also agreed that your insurance is going to be primary and non-contributory from our insurance on this. And so what that did was put a first and second line of defense before our client's limits were going to be potentially exposed. And then furthermore, for the client, the homeowner's benefit was that person was even further down the road of being potentially exposed on it. So again, contract wording, very clear on whose everyone's responsibilities were. The sympathy factor or the, hey, you're a bigger firm than ours factor, none of those
Yeah.
things applied. It was what was agreed upon in the contract, and then how did the policy respond? And in this instance, it did take several years, and it did eventually get settled out, and our client's insurance was not impacted by this. Again, a very terrible scenario, but
Hmm.
if you look at, had they not had any of those things in their contract, it likely would have put them out of business, because it just, the dollar amounts that we were talking about in this particular situation were large, and it'd be very tough to live another day and be able to open your business again on it. So Again, good wording in the contracts didn't prevent the tragedy from happening, but again, accidents will happen. It did preserve our clients' insurance coverage.
Gotcha. Man, two examples there. I got more than I bargained for, which is good. But yeah, it there is a lot to review. I mean, even our team that's reviewing these. I mean, we spend a lot of time going through them for a reason. And a lot of times it feels like you're going through looking for the same, very similar things every time. But at the end of the day, it is surprising how that structure makes a massive difference. So those anecdotes are important, and yeah, thank you for sharing those.
Yeah, and the goal with all these is, hey, learn. These are all real things that can happen. For people to say, "Oh, I can't afford to take the time to understand this stuff," or "I can't
Yeah.
afford to," you're just it, and maybe you'll go your career and not have that type of thing happen to your firm. But people work too hard every day to try and succeed. That you really, if you ignore this stuff, it's at your own peril. And it really, there's no reason why you should not.
Yeah. And if you're not looking to, review it, it doesn't even have to be us. Just find a broker that knows this space and have them review what you're doing. It's helpful. Get the right people involved and take a look at it.
100%. Have a
Yeah.
great team. Yep.
Yep. You need it. So, well, Mike, I think that's everything, right? Is there anything else?
That covers all I wanted to today.
Perfect. All right. Well, if you're still with us, thank you. Click subscribe. Again, we're going to be on all of the platforms, at least the ones that we know most people look at. I don't know. We were talking about Spotify. Like, I don't know. Mike and I really haven't used Spotify very much. So Apple Podcasts for us. But anyways, yeah, thank you guys for being here. Thanks for listening. Mike, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to educate us and just, I don't know. I know you love talking about insurance, so you're like, this is fun for me, but it makes a big difference. So appreciate it, and we'll see you all again next week.
Thanks a lot, Peter. Have a good
All
day.
right, thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Falcon Forward does not provide financial or insurance advice. The following disclosure is available at falconwest.com/privacy-policy. All information provided is for educational and entertainment purposes only. We encourage you to do your own research and consult with qualified professionals regarding your specific needs. If you have specific questions about your property and casualty insurance, our contact information can be found at falconwest.com. This content expresses the views of Falcon West Insurance Brokers, Inc. as of the date indicated, and such views are subject to change without notice. Falcon West has no duty or obligation to update the information contained herein. Further, Falcon West makes no representation, and it should not be assumed that past insurance market conditions, coverage terms, or pricing are an indication of future results. This information is being made available for educational purposes only and should not be used as a substitute for insurance advice tailored to your specific circumstances. The information contained herein does not constitute and should not be construed as an offering of insurance coverage, a guarantee of coverage terms, or a binding quote in any jurisdiction. Certain information contained herein concerning insurance markets, industry trends, and risk performance is based on or derived from information provided by independent third-party sources. Falcon West Insurance Brokers, Inc. believes that the sources from which such information has been obtained are reliable. However, it cannot guarantee the accuracy of such information and has not independently verified the accuracy or completeness of such information or the assumptions on which information is based. This content, including the information contained herein, may not be copied, reproduced, republished, or posted in whole or in part in any form without the prior written consent of Falcon West Insurance Brokers, Inc. To obtain our property and casualty license information, please visit falconwest.com. Our California license number is 0616640.